There's a kind of power that doesn't need a microphone. It doesn't fight for the spotlight, and it doesn't shout to be heard. But when it enters a room, the very air changes. We are taught to admire the storm, the loud opinion, the quick comeback, the relentless hustle. But true wisdom, the kind that endures, is often found in the calm eye of that storm, not because it is timid, but because it is anchored, centered, and deeply self-aware. A woman of profound intelligence isn't necessarily the one with the most accolades or the most forceful argument. She is the one who can stand in the middle of a fire and not become the fire. She is the one who understands the profound difference between being wanted and being valued. She is the one who has learned that the way she holds space for herself dictates how the world will ever dare to enter it. This isn't a guide on how to perform or perfect. It's an invitation to awaken. Because when a woman awakens to her own inner world, her patterns, her energy, her silent choices, she taps into a quiet strength that commands respect without ever demanding it. Let's embark on that journey of awakening together. If this is your first time here, I'm glad you found your way to self-mastery. We explore timeless truths to help you protect your peace, elevate your being, and live in alignment with your purpose. I invite you to subscribe and activate the notification bell so you're always here for the wisdom that resonates with your spirit and has the power to redefine your journey. Let us begin. There's a vast ocean between being quiet and being still. Countless people are quiet. They bite their tongue in meetings. They swallow their feelings in relationships. But inside, their mind is a turbulent sea, crashing waves of anxiety, currents of self-doubt, a desperate search for a lighthouse of approval. A truly intelligent woman learns a secret few master. Inner peace isn't about silencing the world outside, but about calming the sea within. She doesn't build walls to protect herself from people. She simply becomes the sovereign captain of her own ship, deciding which harbors she will dock in and which storms she will navigate around. Her mind becomes a sanctuary, not a public square. Not every opinion gets a vote, not every emotion gets to take the helm. This isn't born from superiority, it is the hard-won fruit of self-knowledge. The kind of knowledge that comes from having let her ship be thrown by the waves of others' chaos one too many times. She has learned, often through painful voyages, that wrestling with every pirate who tries to board her ship, justifying her route to every passenger, and reacting to every change in the weather doesn't lead to a safe harbor. It only leads to a shipwreck. In neuroscience, this is often discussed as managing cognitive bandwidth. Think of your brain as a finite electrical circuit. Every argument, every negative loop of thought, every emotional entanglement is another appliance plugged in. Too many, and you blow a fuse, triggering cortisol, brain fog, and exhaustion. This chronic overload damages the prefrontal cortex, your mind's captain, responsible for clear judgment, emotional regulation, and empathy. But when a woman learns to cultivate her inner stillness, she unplugs the unnecessary appliances. She protects her circuit. This one act is the bedrock of her emotional intelligence, not as a theory, but as a lived reality. Imagine a woman whose inner world is a constant storm. A partner's careless word is a tidal wave. A boss's oversight is a hurricane. A friend's forgotten promise is a maelstrom of rejection. Her life is a constant state of being tossed and turned. Her nervous system never finding a calm port. But now picture a different woman. Her partner is caught in his own emotional storm. Instead of sailing into it, she holds her own ship steady. She observes the storm from a safe distance. And from that place of calm, she doesn't just react to the wind and rain, she sees the scared person at the center of it. She chooses a response that is a lighthouse, not another wave. This is the power of inner stillness. It is not passivity, it is mastery. And it fundamentally alters how the world engages with you. In ancient traditions, there is an idea that the master doesn't just see the world, they feel its currents. They feel the energy behind the words. They notice the dissonance between a bright smile and tired eyes. They sense the truth that hides in the pauses of a conversation. Because her own inner sea is calm, she can perceive the subtlest shifts in the weather around her. A woman like this becomes an enigma to many. Why? Because she is not emotionally predictable. She doesn't sail into every battle. She doesn't anchor in every drama. She doesn't get swept up in every current of gossip. And in a world addicted to the crashing waves of reaction, her calm sea becomes magnetic. People feel a different quality in her presence, a depth, a quiet certainty. And this stillness isn't just a spiritual concept, it's a practical tool. In our relationships, it's the difference between a conflict that shatters connection and a conversation that forges it. There is a story of a master archer who was asked her secret. She said, "Before I ever pull the string, I wait for the wind to stop." People would watch her stand for minutes, arrow nocked, just waiting. She explained, "I wait for the noise to settle, not the noise of the world, but the noise in my heart. I wait for clarity to arrive, not my anger, not my fear, but clarity." This is the woman who does not speak from her wound. She waits for her wisdom to return, and only then does she let her words fly. Science confirms this practice. Research shows that a 90-second pause after an emotional trigger allows the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, to quiet down, letting the rational prefrontal cortex come back online. This means that by simply waiting, you dramatically increase the odds of responding with wisdom instead of regret. Women of deep intelligence know this intuitively, so they practice the pause not just on a yoga mat, but in the heat of the moment. When criticized, they don't scramble for a defense. When misunderstood, they don't flood the conversation with explanations. When dismissed, they don't shrink. They hold steady within, and from that stillness, the next wise move becomes clear. This stillness isn't an absence of feeling. On the contrary, it is the capacity to feel everything and be commanded by nothing. This leads to the second practice, knowing when to be water and when to be rock. Water is often seen as passive, and rock is often seen as aggressive. But a woman of profound intelligence has moved beyond these simple labels. She has been water too often and been evaporated by others' heat. She has been rock too often and watched love erode against her hardness. Now, through practice and deep self-awareness, she has learned to be both. The art she practices is emotional agility, not for anyone else's approval, but out of a deep respect for her own life force. She understands that an explosion of anger might feel potent for a second, but it drains her reserves for a week. She knows that always being the water, forgiving too fast, bending too far, evaporating to avoid a conflict, ultimately costs her the very ground she stands on. So she discovers a new way of being. When someone disrespects her space, she doesn't become a tidal wave. She becomes rock. She doesn't move. She simply stops giving them a place to stand in her life. When a friend's actions are consistently thoughtless, she doesn't scold them like a harsh storm. She simply becomes water that flows elsewhere to more fertile ground. When life's pressures mount, she doesn't shatter like brittle stone. She becomes water slowing down, finding the path of least resistance, listening to her own flow. This is rock, quiet, calm, firm, unshakable. But within that rock, there is always the capacity for water, the water to forgive without being a fool, the water to feel grief without drowning, the water to love with an open heart without losing her form. Psychologists call this emotional regulation, the ability to pivot between emotional states with intention. It is not the denial of feeling, but the presence of choice. In relationships, this builds profound trust. A man, for instance, feels fundamentally safer with a woman who can feel her emotions deeply without being swept away by them. A woman who can state her needs with the clarity of rock, not the chaos of a storm. A woman who can hold her own center with grace, even when the world outside is unstable. This isn't a performance, it is the signature of maturity, and it is a magnet for genuine intimacy. There's the story of a woman whose partner was prone to emotional outbursts. For years, she would either meet his fire with her own fire, or she would shrink and disappear. One day, during a tense moment, he began to raise his voice. Instead of reacting, she simply put her hand on her own heart and said calmly, "I can see you're upset. I will not be a part of this conversation while it feels like this. I am here, and I will be ready to listen when you are ready to speak with respect." That was the moment everything shifted. He didn't hear an attack. He didn't see weakness. He felt the quiet, unshakable boundary of a rock, but he also felt the open, loving invitation of water. This is the woman who earns respect. Even if people don't like her decision, they know it is her truth. Her presence is not volatile. Her love is not a negotiation. Her emotions are not a weapon. She is a source of peace, and people will either rise to meet her there, or they will naturally drift away. From a neurological standpoint, this emotional agility strengthens the pathways in the prefrontal cortex, creating a feedback loop of increasing resilience. When she regulates her emotions, she co-regulates her relationships, making them safer. When her relationships are safe, her brain operates with more clarity and creativity. It's a virtuous cycle of self-mastery. But it begins with a single choice to pause, to breathe, and to ask, does this response honor the woman I am becoming? And even when she fails, as all of us do, she doesn't condemn herself. She reflects, she recalibrates, she learns. That is wisdom in motion. A woman who knows when to be water and when to be rock is not easily manipulated. She cannot be baited into anger or shamed into submission. She moves with an inner authority, and this brings a silent, undeniable power to all her connections. She doesn't operate from a place of dominance or fragility. She lives in a state of balance. And this balance of stillness and agility, of rock and water, becomes the foundation of her influence, her love, and her legacy. There is a quiet superpower that deeply intelligent women cultivate, one that is almost invisible in a culture that rewards speaking first. That superpower is observation. She has disciplined herself to see, to listen beneath the noise, to stay anchored in awareness while the world begs her to react. This habit isn't born of shyness, but of wisdom. It is a form of quiet power, the choice to understand a situation fully before attempting to influence it. A highly intelligent woman watches more than she talks, not because she is empty of opinions, but because she knows most people are just waiting for their turn to speak, not truly listening. And she refuses to pour her energy into conversations that are just echoes in a canyon. There's a story of a woman who joined a high-stakes corporate team. While her peers were quick to showcase their ideas and challenge others to establish dominance, she spent the first few weeks in a state of active listening. She watched. She paid attention. She observed who spoke over whom, who took credit for team wins, who deflected blame for losses, and who stayed silent but held the real wisdom. By the end of her first month, she hadn't just learned the org chart, she had mapped the hidden network of influence, ego, and integrity. This quiet observation meant that when she finally did speak, her words had the weight of truth. Her insights were not just loud, they were resonant, and resonance is rare. When a woman learns to truly see people, not with the filter of judgment, but with the lens of clarity, she gains a form of respect that can never be demanded. Neuroscience explains this phenomenon through the mirror neuron system, the brain's network for empathy and intuition. When a woman deliberately practices deep observation, noticing not just words, but the music behind them, the tone, the posture, the flicker in an eye, she is actively training her intuition. This sixth sense isn't magic. It is the potent combination of focused attention and high emotional literacy. So many women recount stories of looking back and saying, "I knew it. I saw the red flags." The partner whose apologies never came with changed behavior. The friend whose compliments felt like veiled critiques. The boss who was charming to superiors but dismissive to subordinates. The signs were always there, but they were drowned out by the noise of hope, business, and the desire to believe the best in people. But the woman who observes doesn't rush to judgment or to trust. She waits. She gathers data. She notices how people act not just when things are good, but when they are under pressure, when they feel unseen, when their ego is challenged. She listens with her entire body because she knows people reveal their true character in the margins, not in the headlines. In relationships, this habit is both a shield and a bridge. A woman who observes is not easily swayed by superficial charm. She sees past the curated performance. She notices the hairline fractures between what someone says and what they do. She watches how a person treats those who can do nothing for them, how they speak of their past, how they handle disappointment. And from this mosaic of small details, she understands their core. But she also uses this observation to build love. She notices her partner isn't just quiet, he's carrying a weight. She senses when a friend is struggling, not from their words, but from their energy. And this allows her to offer support that is precise and meaningful, creating true safety. Because she is not just assuming, she is attending. A wise woman once said, "I don't need to ask many questions. I just watch, and the answers reveal themselves." This calm awareness makes her presence deeply compelling. She listens in a way that makes others feel truly witnessed. She notices the small things that reveal the soul. The way someone's voice softens when they talk about a passion. The way their shoulders relax when they finally feel understood. The way their eyes sparkle when they share a treasured memory. And because she truly sees people, people feel safe to be real with her. But her observation is not just directed outward. She turns that same powerful lens inward. She watches her own tone when she is feeling stressed. She observes the familiar pathways of her thoughts when insecurity creeps in. She becomes a student of her own inner landscape. And this is the moment observation becomes alchemy. When she can observe herself without the poison of judgment, she gains the power to change with grace. She notices when she is slipping into old survival patterns, the urge to people please, to over-explain, to shut down emotionally. And because she sees them with clarity, she is no longer their puppet. This self-awareness is the key to emotional freedom. It is the difference between saying, "This is just how I am," and "This is a pattern I am choosing to release." From this grounded foundation of observation, another powerful habit naturally blossoms: creation. A profoundly intelligent woman is not satisfied being a mere consumer of life, of trends, of opinions, of drama, of validation. She is a creator. She creates sanctuary in her home. She creates structure in her work. She creates moments of beauty in ordinary days. She creates peace in her relationships. This act of creation is not always for an audience. It may never hang in a gallery or be published in a book, but it is deeply real. She writes to understand her own mind. She cooks a meal with care and attention. She designs a morning routine that nourishes her soul. She curates her own environment with intention. And in these small, consistent acts, she sends a powerful message to herself every day. I am the architect of my reality, not a passive spectator waiting for the show to begin. There is a difference between motion and movement. One is driven by impulse, the other by intention. A woman endlessly scrolling, reacting, rushing, consuming, she is in motion. But a woman who pauses to write, who reads to learn, who builds to express, who rests to restore, that woman is in movement. It is intentional, it is purposeful, it is alive. This pivot from consumption to creation is revolutionary for relationships. A woman who is constantly consuming advice, validation, and others' opinions outsources her own inner authority. She becomes dependent on the outside world to define her, to tell her how to feel, what to think, and who she is. But when she creates, she reclaims that authority. Her journal becomes her most trusted confidante. Her daily practices become her anchor. Her own silence becomes her wisest teacher. In romantic partnerships, this habit is the antidote to emotional dependency. She doesn't look to her partner to be her source of purpose or stability. She brings her own well of purpose to the relationship. She creates her own joy. She doesn't wait for it to be delivered. She initiates her own healing. She doesn't demand it from another. This makes her love a gift, not a transaction. There's a story of a woman who went through a devastating professional failure. Her identity was entirely woven into her career. When it unraveled, she felt like nothing. For months, she consumed podcasts, articles, advice from friends. It all helped, but a core piece was missing. Then one day, she started a small garden on her balcony. She hadn't planted anything in years. As she began to tend to the soil, to water the seeds, to watch for the first sprout, something inside her shifted. The grief didn't vanish, but it found a new form. Her garden became a living metaphor, a place to practice patience, a mirror for her own resilience. She later said, "It wasn't the plants that healed me. It was the act of nurturing something back to life that reminded me I could do the same for myself." This is the power of creation. It's not about the product, it is about the process. And in that process, a woman reclaims herself. Science supports this wisdom. Creative acts stimulate the brain's default mode network, which is crucial for self-reflection, integrating memories, and envisioning the future. When a woman creates, she isn't just distracting herself from her problems, she is actively rewiring her brain to solve them. This habit also transforms her relationship with time. She no longer feels like life is a runaway train she is just trying to hang on to. She becomes the conductor. She chooses where to put her energy, when to rest, and what to cultivate. She doesn't just consume entertainment. She creates experiences. She doesn't just consume food. She creates nourishment. She doesn't just consume relationships. She contributes life and energy to them. And as she does this, a quiet magnetism emerges. People can feel when a woman is living from a place of intention. Her presence has substance. She isn't chasing the spotlight. She isn't competing for scraps of attention. She simply is. And that state of being is more compelling than any performance. But creation requires a gentle discipline. It is always easier to consume than to create, to scroll than to write, to react than to build. And so the woman of wisdom doesn't wait for inspiration to strike. She builds a rhythm, a sacred appointment with her own creative spirit. Whether it's 15 minutes of writing in the morning, a silent walk to gather her thoughts, or an evening a week dedicated to a hobby, she honors that commitment. And in doing so, she finds her way back home, again and again, not in the noise of the world, but in the quiet, powerful act of choosing what she will bring into being. Observation teaches her what is real. Creation shows her what is possible. And together, they form the heartbeat of a life lived with purpose, not just for show. There is a silent grace in a woman whose boundaries are felt before they are ever spoken. She does not post them on a billboard. She does not defend them with anger. She does not shatter her own peace just to keep someone else comfortable. Her boundary is not a fortress wall designed to keep people out. It is the banks of a river, guiding the flow of her own energy. Those who can respect the current of her river are welcome to journey with her. Those who cannot naturally find their own way to a different shore. A woman of deep intelligence understands that boundaries are not about punishing others, they are about honoring herself. She has learned, through the harsh tuition of experience, that over giving to those who under-appreciate leads to a spiritual bankruptcy, an exhaustion, a bitterness, and a total disconnection from her own intuition. And so her boundaries become a sacred practice, enforced not with volume, but with unwavering consistency. When someone consistently disrespects her time, she doesn't lecture them. She simply becomes less available to them. When someone attempts to cross a line with passive aggression or subtle manipulation, she doesn't engage in a debate to prove her point. She simply withdraws her energy with a quiet finality. And in that silent withdrawal, she communicates a message more powerful than any speech. I honor myself, even if you will not. The world often labels women who do this as cold, difficult, or intimidating. But this judgment misses the entire backstory. It doesn't see the nights she cried in frustration. It doesn't see the times she bent herself into a pretzel, to be accommodating. It doesn't see the years she spent explaining her feelings to people who were committed to misunderstanding her. Those fires of experience did not turn her to ash, they forged her into steel. And steel does not need to shout to be strong. In psychology, the term enmeshment describes relationships where personal boundaries are so porous that one person's identity gets lost in the other's. A woman of wisdom has often survived such entanglements. She has loved so completely that she forgot where she ended and another began. And when that love was not met with equal respect, she was left feeling hollowed out. But instead of letting that experience make her bitter, she let it make her wise, not more guarded, but more discerning. And from that discernment, she began to build a life where her boundaries were not a reaction to fear, but a reflection of her own intrinsic worth. Think of the woman who used to be a chronic yes-sayer. Yes to extra projects. Yes to one-sided friendships. Yes to forgiving behavior that was never going to change. She confused self-sacrifice with love and availability with value. But inside, she was crumbling. No one saw it because she was so good at pretending until the day she hit a wall of burnout. It wasn't just physical, it was soul deep. And in the profound stillness that followed her collapse, a sacred truth emerged. No one was going to rescue her or grant her permission to live a life she deserved. She had to claim it. And claiming it began with boundaries. She started with small acts of self-possession, turning off her work phone after 7 p.m. without apology, saying a simple no, thank you, to invitations that didn't excite her, canceling plans when her body screamed for rest. And quietly, the ecosystem of her life began to change. Some people protested and drifted away. Others leaned in and began to treat her with the reverence she was finally showing herself. A woman who embodies her boundaries is not cruel. She is simply no longer for sale. She understands that a partner who is truly right for her will not see her boundaries as a threat, but as a sign of her strength and stability. He will not require her to shrink to overfunction or to exhaust herself with explanations just to be heard. He will learn her rhythm. He will cherish her peace. In dating and relationships, this becomes a powerful filter. People who rely on guilt tripping, emotional blackmail, or love bombing to get their way will quickly find that they have no leverage. She refuses to play emotional chess. She will let go of a connection, even if it hurts, because she knows that no relationship is worth the cost of self-abandonment. There is a saying, "Yano is not up for negotiation." The truly intelligent woman lives this not as an act of defiance, but as a simple fact of her existence. She has nothing to prove. Her presence is her boundary. Her silence is her boundary. Her peace is her boundary. But these boundaries are also internal. She sets firm limits with her own mind, with its tendency to ruminate on the past, to indulge in self-criticism, or to replay old stories of not being chosen. She notices when her thoughts are spiraling down a familiar, painful drain, and she gently but firmly says to herself, "No, we are not going there today. That address is no longer my home." This internal boundary is the ultimate act of self-leadership. She is no longer a victim of her own emotional weather. She respects her own energy far too much to squander it on fantasies of revenge or cycles of regret. Her attention is a sacred resource, and she invests it only in what is aligned with her growth and her truth. One woman shared how she used to be an expert at making excuses for others' poor behavior. "He's just stressed." She didn't really mean it. They're just trying their best. But she came to realize that by constantly creating space for their inconsistency, she was erasing her own needs. She wasn't just letting them treat her badly, she was co-signing the behavior. So she made a quiet shift. Now, when an apology isn't followed by a change in behavior, she lovingly detaches. When promises are consistently broken, she adjusts her investment, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because she has learned that attention without respect is not connection, and words without action are not love. In a romantic partnership, a woman like this is both a mystery and an anchor. A mystery because she cannot be manipulated or easily defined. An anchor because her energy is stable and clear. Her partner feels the deep safety of her standards. He knows that her love is abundant, but it is not unconditional in the face of disrespect. She will not beg. She will not audition. She will not compromise her soul just to keep someone's attention. This isn't a power play. It is power that comes from being fully home in oneself. She knows her worth. She knows her values. And she knows that anyone who asks her to betray those things in the name of love is not offering love at all. Eastern philosophy speaks of becoming like water, soft enough to flow, but powerful enough to shape stone. A woman in harmony with herself doesn't fight life, she flows with it. And an essential part of that flow is knowing when to say no, when to retreat, when to protect the sacred space that allows her to thrive. That protection is not always a grand gesture. Sometimes it's choosing not to engage in toxic gossip. Sometimes it's refusing to give an emotional reaction to someone who is obviously trying to provoke her. And sometimes it's simply choosing the peace of silence over the futility of arguing with someone who is determined to misunderstand her. There is profound liberation in no longer needing to be understood by everyone, in trusting that what is meant for you will flow to you, and what is not will flow away. Boundaries are not a one-time decision. They are a living practice, forged in the fires of experience, heartbreak, and the quiet, fierce resolution to never abandon oneself again. A woman who has walked through it all eventually arrives at this sacred ground. I know what it feels like to be dishonored. I will not participate in it again, not from them and not from me. And so her life becomes simpler, not because conflict vanishes, but because confusion does. Her yes is full of her whole being. Her no is full of her deepest peace, and she no longer has to justify either one. A woman who moves this way fundamentally changes the energy around her. People become more mindful in her presence, more honest, not because they fear her, but because they admire her. They sense that this is not a woman you can offer scraps to, not someone you can gaslight, not someone you can wear down with persistence. This woman has come home to herself, and in doing so, she teaches the world how to treat her, not with a lesson plan, but with her very being. If someone were to ask why she won't allow something, she doesn't need to give a speech. She can just smile and walk on, because her boundary is not a point of debate. It is a reflection of her soul, and it requires no one's permission. There is a profound power in a woman who treats herself with unwavering dignity, not just in public declarations, but in her private, daily rituals. Not the dramatic acts that earn applause, but the quiet, consistent things she does when absolutely no one is watching. These small, repetitive actions, so often dismissed as trivial, are the very architecture of her self-worth. They are the tangible proof of how she values her own existence, not in theory, but in daily, practiced reality. A woman of deep intelligence knows that confidence is not a mood, it is an outcome. It is the result of how she nourishes herself, how she speaks to herself, how she rests, moves, dresses, and consistently returns to her own center. These may seem like mundane details, but they are the bedrock of her identity. They are the rich soil from which her clarity, her peace, and her relationships grow. It starts at the very beginning of her day. A woman in alignment with herself does not lunge for her phone as her first act. She reaches for herself for a moment of stillness, of gratitude, of intention. She understands that the first energy she invites in will set the energetic tone for the next 16 hours. And so she carves out a morning practice that reminds her of her own sovereignty before the world rushes in to tell her who she should be. It might be 5 deep breaths, a cup of warm lemon water, a single paragraph in a journal, or a moment of silence by a window, not as a chore, but as an act of devotion to her own well-being. There's a story of a woman who was drowning in the demands of her life, a stressful job, aging parents, a partner who was emotionally draining. She felt she was losing herself, piece by piece. Her energy was brittle. Her responses were sharp. A mentor gave her a simple challenge for 1 week. Spend the first 15 minutes of your day doing something that feels like coming home to yourself. No phone, no news, just you. She was skeptical. How will 15 minutes change anything? But she committed. For 15 minutes, she would sit with a cup of tea and just listen. To the birds, to her own breathing. Within a month, her entire world had shifted. Not because her problems disappeared, but because her capacity to handle them had expanded. She was less reactive. She made wiser choices. She felt grounded in her own skin again. That small, consistent ritual became her anchor in the storm. What this teaches us is a simple, powerful truth: self-respect is not built in a day. It is accumulated in the details. You don't find it in a single act of bravado. You build it through the daily, humble rituals that affirm your own value, especially when the world isn't affirming it for you. A woman who practices this doesn't outsource her sense of worth. She doesn't need a partner's non-stop praise to feel beautiful, because she has already taken the time to anoint her own skin with care. She doesn't depend on a boss's approval to feel competent, because she has already witnessed herself honoring her own small promises. Whether it was to drink enough water, finish a workout, or write one true sentence, her small acts of integrity compound. They build on each other. They become her unshakable inner fortune, and this fortune is reflected in all her relationships. A woman who respects herself is naturally more discerning, not from a place of superiority, but from a place of self-preservation. She no longer has the tolerance for superficial connections. She doesn't let inconsistent people monopolize her energy. She doesn't remain in dynamics where she must constantly audition for the role of being worthy of care. She isn't aggressive about it. She just knows that she will not sacrifice her peace, her rhythm, or her rituals to be loved. The love she accepts must be a match for the love she already provides herself. Psychology confirms that rituals create a sense of safety in the nervous system. The human brain craves predictability. When a woman establishes consistent, nourishing rituals, morning journaling, an evening walk, mindful meal preparation, she is sending a direct message to her brain. I've got you. You are safe. You are grounded. You are cared for. This deep sense of internal safety is what allows her to navigate external chaos with grace. Consider a woman in a relationship with an unpredictable partner. One day he's loving, the next he's distant. Her heart, caught in this cycle, might begin to doubt its own worth. But because she has anchored herself in her daily rituals, she does not capsize. She feels the pain, yes, but she knows the way back home to herself. She has built the muscle memory of self-soothing, of finding her center not in another person's approval, but in her own breath and body. This is not a concept, it is a capacity. A woman who nourishes herself daily develops profound emotional resilience. Her rituals become a constant refrain. No matter what storm is raging out there, in here, I am home. And that knowing is what prevents her from spiraling when life inevitably disappoints. There was a woman who made a simple practice of lighting a small stick of incense every evening. It was a tiny act, but for her, it was a sacred contract. It meant that no matter how chaotic the day had been, she could always return to a moment of peace and fragrance. That scent became a trigger for calm, a prayer, a commitment. On nights her heart was breaking, she still lit it. On nights she was celebrating, she lit it. On nights she felt numb and empty, she still lit it. That unwavering consistency became a powerful healing agent, a reminder that even when the world felt unstable, she was still stable for herself. And that is the soul of daily rituals. They are not designed to fix you. They are designed to remind you of your own inherent dignity, your strength, your wholeness, your sacredness. In relationships, the ripple effect is immense. A woman who is rooted in her rituals does not chase manufactured excitement. She doesn't need drama to feel alive. Her inner landscape is already rich and fulfilling. She brings a calm, centered energy into her connections, not a frantic, needy one. She listens more deeply, speaks more thoughtfully, and responds more wisely because she is not operating from a place of deficit. She is already full, and that fullness is palpable. People feel it. A partner may not be able to articulate why he feels so safe and at ease in her presence. He just does, because her energy is not grasping. Her attention is not a commodity. Her presence is not a performance. She is simply there, whole, anchored, and present. This also gives her the fortitude to walk away from what is not right for her, not with anger, but with reverence for her own well-being. She doesn't need to slam the door. She can close it softly, without needing the other person to understand, because her rituals have taught her that being alone is not a punishment, it is a sacred return. She knows how to be with herself without feeling lonely, because in her rituals, she has become her own best friend. One of the most transformative things a woman can do is to begin treating herself with the same care and respect she wishes to receive from the world, to speak to herself with compassion, to nourish herself with intention, to dress herself with dignity, to rest without guilt, to move her body with gratitude. When she does this day after day, the universe around her begins to recalibrate. The famous saying, "You teach people how to treat you," is not just a nice idea, it is an energetic law. When a woman consistently puts her own needs last, the world learns that her needs are not a priority, not out of malice, but because she has modeled that truth. But when she consistently honors her own space, her energy, and her peace, the world learns a new lesson. This is a woman who must be met with presence, or she will not be met at all. In the art of self-mastery, rituals evolve beyond mere habits. They become a spiritual practice, a daily declaration that says, "I am worthy of my own care. I am whole. I am the guardian of my own energy." And this guardianship is not a weight, it is the ultimate freedom. Because once a woman truly claims it, she is no longer waiting for someone else to fill her cup. She fills it herself, daily, intentionally, joyfully. In Eastern philosophy, there's the concept that how you do anything is how you do everything. The way you make your bed, the way you sip your tea, the way you walk down the street. All are expressions of your inner state. A woman who hurtles through her day, tense and distracted, brings that same fragmented energy to her relationships. But a woman who pauses to truly savor a bite of food, who organizes her space with intention, who takes a moment to breathe before she speaks, she brings that same quality of presence to the people she loves. Presence is the most precious gift of ritual, and presence is the deepest language of love. Imagine being in a relationship with someone who is truly present with you, who puts their phone away when you're talking, who recalls the small details of your day, who senses your mood before you have to announce it. That quality of attention is the rarest currency in our modern world. And it starts with how we attend to ourselves, because a woman cannot offer her presence to another if she is chronically absent from her own life. So these daily rituals, however small, are the most important work she will ever do. They are the roots that ground her, the water that nourishes her. If she abandons them, her spirit will wither. But if she tends to them, her spirit will become a source of shade and strength, not just for herself, but for everyone lucky enough to be in her orbit. There is no one right ritual. For one woman, it is dancing in her kitchen. For another, it is sitting in silence. Some write letters they will never mail. Others walk barefoot on the grass. Some pray, some stretch, some sing off key. The what is irrelevant. The why is everything. She does it for herself, not for an audience, not to achieve, but to return to center, to return to self, to return to her own truth. And when she does this again and again, day after day, her relationships are transformed, not because she forces others to change, but because she has changed. She becomes a woman who knows her own value, a woman who gives from a full well, not an empty one, a woman who walks into a room not hoping to be accepted, but knowing she already belongs to herself. And this wholeness cannot be faked. It must be cultivated. and it is cultivated one small, sacred ritual at a time. When a woman starts to live this way, when her stillness is her power, her emotions are her allies, her mind is a keen observer, her life is her creation, her boundaries are her integrity, and her rituals are her devotion, she no longer needs to search for her worth in the reflections of others. She embodies it. She no longer asks, "Am I good enough?" because she feels her own goodness in the way she tends to her life. She no longer wonders, "Will they choose me?" because she no longer clings to anyone who requires convincing. She becomes a woman whose very presence is her message, not because she is louder, but because she is more aligned. And in that alignment, her entire world shifts. Her standards become effortless. Her circle becomes sacred. She no longer fears solitude because she is never separate from herself. She no longer accepts crumbs because she knows how to prepare a feast for her own soul. Her life becomes her argument. Her energy becomes her protection. Her habits become her throne, and anyone who wishes to sit beside her must first learn to honor her with the same integrity she shows herself every single day. That is the essence of a woman of profound intelligence.